I want you to imagine, just for a second, waking up in an underground cavern.
Oh, yeah.
You open your eyes, and the walls around you are bathed in this incredibly soft, luminescent lavender light. And you realize you're safe. You're lying next to a new ally.
Which sounds, quite peaceful at first.
Right. But there's a massive catch. Actually, there are two. First, you have absolutely zero memory of how you got down into this cave.
And the second one is definitely worse.
Yeah, much worse. Your own body might be harboring a murderous, survival-driven demon that literally takes the wheel the second your conscious mind blacks out.
It is the ultimate nightmare, really. It's a total loss of biological and psychological autonomy. You're just reduced to a helpless passenger in your own skin, watching your hands do things you can't stop.
Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we're taking you through a comprehensive reader's guide to a very specific, incredibly pivotal chapter of a much larger story.
A really heavy story, too.
Absolutely. We are looking at Chapter 20, which is aptly titled Recovery, from D.P. Kirk's deeply complex, very dark sci-fi and fantasy novel, San Vitae, The Awakening.
It's just a remarkable piece of literature. And, our mission today isn't just to recap a chapter. We want to review the quality of this specific segment within the sprawling context of the book's lore.
We're going to dig into all of it.
Yeah, the goal is to extract the mechanics, the world building, and those intense psychological stakes that make this chapter operate on so many different levels.
By the time we're done today, you're going to see exactly why this book is worth tracking down. But before we get to the amnesia, the glowing cavern, and the demon, we really need to unpack the broken reality that our protagonist, Kurien, is trying to recover from.
Right, because Chapter 20 only lands with that heavy impact when you understand the sheer scale of the apocalypse that birthed this world.
Exactly. The world of San Vitae is not just, in decline. It was shattered long ago by an event they call the Heaven's Scar.
Imagine looking up at the sky and seeing a literal void tear open. 3 celestial spheres fell from that rift, and, they didn't just cause physical destruction.
No, they brought ash, widespread madness, and this strange, highly volatile, mystical energy source known as Vitae.
And that energy completely rewired the geopolitical map.
The survivors didn't unite. They fractured along ideological and biological lines.
They split into 2 massive warring extremes, right? On one side, you have the Santerrie. They're essentially a ruling council of beings who have embraced and absorbed this Vitae energy.
Yeah, the Vitae acts as a cellular enhancer for them. It allows them to perform physical and magical manifestations, accelerate their healing, and project just immense strength. The energy is fluid, almost symbiotic.
But then on the other side of this conflict, you have the Humanis. And the Humanis are terrified of the Vitae, which honestly makes sense if it originally fell from an apocalyptic rift in the sky.
You can't blame them. The Humanis are a pure-blood military faction. They revere unaltered human biology. To them, Vitae is a corruption. It's an alien taint. So they fight back with tech.
Right. They've developed highly advanced DVT technology. We're talking about weaponry and dampening fields engineered on a molecular level to disrupt the biological connection to Vitae, basically severing the Santerrie from their power.
Okay, let's unpack this for a second. You have magical superpowers going head-to-head with an advanced anti-magic military tech. And caught dead in the middle of this meat grinder is our protagonist, Kurien.
Poor Kurien.
Yeah, he started out as a conscript in the city of Rontho. He was basically a bonded protector to a Santerrie leader, Covenness Myasuchi.
But to understand his headspace in Chapter 20, you really have to understand the 12 years prior.
Right. He was captured by enemy inquisitors and thrown into a pitch-black underground vault. For over a decade, he was tortured, drained of his blood for experiments, and isolated in the dark.
And the human mind simply cannot process that duration of sheer agony without breaking. This is where Kirk's grasp of psychological horror really elevates the narrative.
It's so intense.
It is. Kurien's brain employs the ultimate defense mechanism, complete dissociation. As his physical body is being destroyed in the vault, his mind constructs a flawless, 12-year-long hallucination.
It's so devastating to read. He hallucinates that he was never captured at all. He believes he's living this beautiful, peaceful life with his Covenness. He even dreams up a son.
Yeah, a whole family.
He experiences 12 years of daily life, love, and purpose,
Yeah.
and his brain makes it feel 100% real.
It creates a foundational tragedy for the character, because eventually the hallucination shatters. He breaks out of the vault, only to face the whiplash of reality.
Everything is gone.
Exactly. His city is actually in ruins, the family he loved for 12 years never existed, and the torture fundamentally altered him. He emerges as what the lore calls a sanite.
And he isn't alone in this. He manages to rescue a heavily tattooed survivor named Sharina, who is also a Sanite.
Sanites are a uniquely feared class in this universe. They aren't just powerful, they are cursed. They possess what's known as a demon aspect.
Let me throw an analogy at you to see if I'm reading the mechanics of this demon aspect correctly. Think of Kurien's conscious mind as a computer operating system.
Okay, I like where this is going.
The trauma of the vault introduced a catastrophic failure. To keep the hardware his body from dying, the system generates this corrupted, hyper-aggressive antivirus software that runs quietly in the background.
That's a great way to put it.
Right. Now, this antivirus absolutely keeps him alive.
Right.
But when things get critical, it takes over the system and indiscriminately deletes every threat in its path, completely bypassing Kurien's morality. My question is this demon a literal separate entity, or is it just the ultimate weaponized version of Kurien's repressed PTSD?
That is a phenomenal question, and I'd actually argue it's a terrifying synthesis of both.
Really? How so?
Well, if this were a mundane world, we'd classify it strictly as severe dissociative identity disorder born of trauma. But in the world of San Vitae, the mind is fueled by mystical energy.
The Vitae.
Exactly. When you pump a fractured psyche full of vitae, does that pure, unadulterated survival instinct gain a semi-sentient resonance? I think Kirk implies that the magic actually gives physical weight to the trauma.
Wow.
It isn't just a psychological defense mechanism. The vitae carves out an independent predatory identity inside him.
That blurs the line between mental illness and demonic possession in such a clever way.
It really forces the reader to confront a dark theme. In a world broken by a cosmic cataclysm where people are shooting divide lasers and teleporting, the most dangerous monsters aren't the warring political factions.
It's the trauma.
Yes. The ultimate threat is the shattered human psyche, weaponized by magic.
Which brings us to the moment Kurien wakes up in Chapter 20. He opens his eyes in this underground utility cavern.
And the sensory contrast Kirk uses here is brilliant.
It really is. After all this talk of torture and demons, the chapter opens with an incredibly serene, quiet moment. Kurien is mesmerized by Sharina's bioluminescent tattoos, which are projecting this dancing lavender light against the rock walls.
But the serenity is incredibly fragile. Sharina explains to him how they ended up in this cavern, and the reality of his condition sets in. Kurien has been navigating the flooded, ruined utility tunnels in a complete fugue state.
He was sleepwalking through an apocalypse. He has zero memory of getting there. Sharina tells him he was delirious, muttering about sensing an antivitae.
And an antivitae is no small thing. It refers to an ancient, immensely powerful being dating back to the time of the cataclysm.
So just its presence messed him up?
Basically, yeah. The sheer energetic frequency of an antivitae in the vicinity was apparently enough to override Kurien's Sanite biology and put him into a trance. It highlights how little control he has over his own mind and body.
So they know they have to keep moving. They know there are new Covenant hazmat soldiers sweeping the tunnels above them. They're creeping through the dark, trying to stay off the radar, when they literally bump into someone in the shadows.
And of all the scavengers and soldiers in the ruins, it is Tippin, Kurien's former best friend from Maratha.
The odds of intersecting with a ghost from your past in the pitch-black depths of a ruined city's utility system are astronomically low. But from a narrative standpoint, it is just the perfect collision.
It's agonizing, because you know exactly what Kurien has endured. You know about the 12 years in the dark, the blood draining, the hallucinations.
But Tippin doesn't know any of that. Tippin looks at Kurien, who hasn't aged a day, and is physically glowing with this vitae energy, and comes to the worst possible conclusion.
He thinks his best friend just walked away.
Yeah. He thinks Kurien abandoned Roant to the scavengers and left him to survive the ashes alone.
Tippin's perspective is grounded in 12 years of relentless suffering. He tells Kurien, without you, there was no one. No one to protect Rantha, and the Strawlers were free to savage the city.
But I have to push back on Tippin here. I mean, they were incredibly close. Why doesn't Tippin just give Kurien 30 seconds to explain where he's been for a decade? Kurien is standing right there trying to say he was locked in a vault, that he didn't have a choice. Why does Tippin instantly shut him down and escalate to violence?
If we connect this to the bigger picture and look at the macro level of what trauma does to a person, Tippin's reaction is deeply authentic. You have to consider the neurochemistry of what Tippin has become.
Right, the drugs.
Exactly. He's heavily addicted to a street drug called white essence. This drug heightens aggression, paranoia, and cynicism. He is chemically primed for violence. But even beyond the drug, trauma makes people intensely insular.
Insular how? Like building walls around themselves.
More like clinging to a survival narrative. For 12 years, Tippin survived by believing Kurien abandoned him. That anger became his fuel. If he stops and listens to Kurien's defense, if he accepts that Kurien was actually tortured in a vault, it shatters the narrative that kept Tippin alive.
Oh, man. So he'd have to admit he was wrong all those years.
Yes. Validating Kurien's pain means acknowledging that his own 12 years of resentment were misplaced. His psyche simply cannot process that level of cognitive dissonance, so the defense mechanism is to attack. He needs Kurien to be the villain.
That is such a profound way to look at it. He's protecting his own warped reality. And because Tippin refuses to listen, the communication completely breaks down, the violence erupts, and this is where Kurien's biological antivirus crashes the entire system.
Tippin strikes first, and he doesn't hold back. He utilizes a blink step, which is a localized teleportation maneuver, to instantly close the distance. He appears right behind Kurien and slashes his back wide open with mechanical claws.
The sensory details of this strike are brutal. The flesh shredding, the sudden blinding heat of the pain, the physical shock is so intense that Kurien's conscious mind just snaps off, goes entirely dark.
The host is unconscious, and the demon aspect takes the wheel.
And the demon operates on pure binary logic, doesn't it? Just eliminate the threat. It does not recognize the concept of a best friend. It only sees an entity that has damaged the host body.
It's an absolute massacre. There are a few mercenaries who had followed them into the tunnels, and the demon tears through them like paper. Then it turns on Tippin.
It summons a solid spike of Vitae energy and literally impales Tippin right through the chest.
While this carnage is happening in the physical world, Kirk takes us inside Kurien's mind. Kurien is trapped in a dark mental void. He can feel the echoes of what his body is doing, and he has to fight his way back to the surface.
He is screaming at the demon from inside his own head, just clawing back control of his nervous system.
And he manages to rip the steering wheel back just in time. He pulls the Vitae shield away before the demon can finish it off. But when his vision clears, the damage is already done.
Tippin is bleeding out on the tunnel floor, his chest torn open, his body completely failing from the trauma and the long-term abuse of the white essence.
This is where we see a fascinating intersection of the world's lore. Kurien immediately attempts to save Tippin's life, and to do it, he uses a piece of equipment called a massive trauma kit, or an MTK.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Because the mechanics of this bridge, hard sci-fi chemistry with deep fantasy magic, Kurien bites open this MTK packet and pours a dense reactive powder directly into Tippin's gaping chest wound.
But the powder isn't just a futuristic bandage, right?
Exactly. The powder is basically a conductive matrix. On its own, it just bubbles when it hits the blood. It requires a biological and magical catalyst to function. This is where the magic system demands intense mental discipline.
So Kurien has to channel his own synaptic energy, literally the electrical impulses from his own nervous system, and infuse it with his Vitae.
Right.
He pushes this combined energy into the powder inside Tippin's chest. And he doesn't just blast him with magic. He has to use deep visualization mantras. He has to hold the exact biological blueprint of healthy tissue in his mind, commanding the powder to mimic human flesh and forcing Tippin's cells to rapidly divide and knit back together.
Think about the sheer willpower required for that process. If his concentration slips, the flesh could knit incorrectly, or the Vitae could overwhelm Tippin's Vitae-ravaged system.
It's so delicate. Extremely. Kurien is physically and emotionally exhausted. He just regained control from a demon. His own back is sliced open, and yet he is pouring his literal life force into the man who just tried to murder him.
It is this desperate, incredibly beautiful act of creation right on the heels of horrific destruction. But it begs a moral question. Does Kurien's desperate, beautiful act of healing Tippin redeem the demon's actions? Or does it just spotlight how terrifyingly close Kurien is to losing his humanity for good?
That tension is the emotional core of the chapter. I wouldn't call it redemption because the mercenaries are still dead and Tippin is still traumatized, but it is a rejection of the demon.
A clawing back of his soul.
Yes. By forcing his own body to heal his attacker, Kurien is proving that his foundational identity is still that of a protector. The human being is still in there, fighting for control. However, this entire sequence casts a very dark, ironic light on the chapter's title, recovery.
Because the physical recovery is the easiest part of the equation.
Precisely. Through the science of the MTK and the magic of his vitae, Kurien can close a fatal chest wound in a matter of minutes. But true recovery is much more complex than knitting flesh together.
Yeah, he cannot apply a chemical powder to the broken trust between him and Tippin.
No, he cannot use a visualization mantra to give them back the 12 years they lost.
And as soon as the physical healing is complete, the emotional failure of the moment sets in. Kurien's vision blurs from the sheer exhaustion of channeling that much energy. When his eyes finally focus again, Tippin is gone.
He just vanishes into the dark of the tunnels. The physical wound is closed, but the psychological rift between them is wider than ever. Tippin is alive, but he is still poisoned by his anger and his addiction. Kurien saved his life, but he couldn't save their friendship.
It just hits so hard. When you step back and look at the wreckage of Chapter 20, it really hits you how masterfully Kirk weaves the grand apocalyptic world building with these incredibly devastating personal stakes.
It operates perfectly as a microcosm for the whole novel. Kirk is constantly mirroring the macro and the micro. You have the external ruins of Roanthe, the flooded utility tunnels, the collapsed architecture, the toxic environment.
And that serves as a direct physical reflection of the internal ruins of the characters' minds.
Exactly. Kurien, Sharina, Tippin, they are quite literally navigating the wreckage of an old world while simultaneously trying to navigate the wreckage of their own traumatized psyches.
And what I love is how Kirk handles Kurien's power level. If you look at a stat sheet for Kurien, the guy sounds like an overpowered superhero. He has a virtually indestructible Vitae shield, he can teleport across the battlefield with blink steps, he can heal fatal injuries, and he possesses this lethal demon aspect.
He's basically a god.
Right. In a lesser author's hands, all the tension would vanish because the hero could just punch his way out of any problem.
What's fascinating here is that Kirk avoids the cliché of the overpowered hero. He makes Kurien's immense power his greatest liability. The tension doesn't come from whether Kurien can physically defeat his enemies. The tension comes from the cost of engaging in the fight at all.
Every time he uses his power, he loses a piece of himself.
Every time he taps into that well, every time he lets the violence escalate, he risks slipping back into the void. The reader isn't worried about his physical survival, they are terrified for his soul.
It's just brilliant. And the supporting cast is given just as much depth. Take Sharina, for example. We only touched on her briefly, but she is actively fighting to reclaim her bodily autonomy after enduring her own horrific trauma. The magic system they interact with feels earned. It isn't just waving a wand. It is grounded in brutal mental discipline, chemical reactions, and severe biological consequences.
It is a narrative that respects its audience. It doesn't use trauma as a cheap, edgy backstory to make the protagonist look cool. It genuinely explores how trauma isolates individuals, how it forces them into destructive survival patterns, and how grueling the everyday work of genuine emotional recovery actually is.
So what does this all mean? Well, Chapter 20, Recovery, is an absolute masterclass in demonstrating the brutal costs of living in the San Vitae world. We get the tragedy of miscommunication and lost time between former brothers in arms. We get a visceral tactical breakdown of how Vitae magic interacts with sci-fi medicine.
It's a gripping read.
And most importantly, we are placed front and center for the terrifying internal war to maintain one's humanity against a literal demon born of suffering.
Whether you are drawn to intricate sci-fi geopolitical conflicts, unique magical mechanics, or deep psychological character studies, this book delivers a multi-layered experience that highly rewards close reading.
I completely agree. But before we officially wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with a lingering thought, something that might completely reframe how you look at this chapter.
Oh, this should be good.
We talked extensively about Kurien's 12 years in the vault. We know that to survive the horrific torture, his mind fabricated an entire decade of a happy, peaceful life. He had a wife, a child, a home, and the illusion was absolutely flawless.
It really was.
His brain proved it is fully capable of constructing an incredibly detailed, immersive false reality to protect him from pain.
A completely airtight psychological fortress.
Right. So if we know his brain can execute a seamless 12-year illusion, how can Kurien, or how can you, as the reader, ever be absolutely certain that his current reality is the truth?
Oh, wow. That is a deeply unsettling proposition.
Think about it. What if waking up in that beautiful, luminescent lavender cavern with Sharina? What if fighting his old best friend in the tunnels? What if this entire arc of recovery is just a new, grittier layer of the dream?
Like his mind shifted genres.
Yes. His brain might have realized the peaceful domestic fantasy wasn't sustainable, so it created an apocalyptic fantasy instead. What if, right now, as he pours his energy into healing Tippin, Kurien is still strapped to a table in the pitch-black vault, hallucinating every second of it? Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Go track down San Vitae, The Awakening, and we will catch you next time.